Hello, my fellow residents. So, the news came out today that Nintendo lost a lot of money in the stock market. It turns out that, well, Pokémon GO really doesn't make them that much money, which a lot of people were surprised about because, well, like many of us out there that are gamers, we just assume Nintendo actually owns Pokémon. But it turns out they actually don't, at least not fully, and here's how it breaks down. The company that actually owns Pokémon is quite literally called the Pokémon Company, and they're owned by 3 different parent companies: Nintendo, Creatures, and Game Freak. What this basically means is that any money that's earned by Pokémon Company has to be split up between 3 parent companies. But to make this more confusing, this isn't a game that was made directly by the Pokémon Company. It was made by a company called Niantic, which basically licensed the Pokémon name in order to make this game. But to make it even more confusing, all the sales that are earned from this game in terms of online sales through little digital trinkets and stuff like that, and any ad revenue that's generated by the game, all that stuff has to go through the iOS store or their Google Play market. So that means Apple and Google also have to make money from this game. So basically, the ownership for Pokémon GO is really confusing, and essentially whoever makes the most profit from it, well, that's all up in the air. I essentially believe that it's Niantic that makes the most money from this, but at the end of the day, that might not actually be accurate because we don't know what kind of shares that Apple and Google get from the sales that they're making from these things on their own markets. What this basically tells me is that Pokémon GO might be really cool, but it's pretty expensive to run and operate, especially if they have to pay for server costs for this thing, which have to be incredibly expensive. I mean, think about it this way. This game is bigger than most social networks out there right now. And if that's the case, with all the server information that requires to run something like that, the cost to make this game just run and turn on every single day have to be astronomical. And it's a little bit insane when you really think about just how many people are playing it right now. The stock market is a very confusing place, and it can be very dangerous for investors, but this is what I assume happened. A whole bunch of people saw Pokémon GO being really successful, so they thought, well, cool, I should invest in the company that owns Pokémon. So they went on Google, typed in who owns Pokémon, and they probably through some very minimal research came across Nintendo's name and just invested in Nintendo, which really wasn't a smart move. Because if Nintendo wasn't making that much money from this game, well, their investment call, their actual earnings report would basically say that, and it would go, oh, we actually didn't make that much money from this game because, surprise, surprise, we don't own all of Pokémon. And that's basically what just happened. So all the investors that put in all the money they could into Pokémon GO and put all the money they could into what they believed was the owner of Pokémon GO, being Nintendo, it basically backfired on them. And a lot of people lost a lot of money. So whoever was remaining in the stock market and bought at the peak when this whole Nintendo stock just rose to the very top, lost a lot. So what does all of this mean for Nintendo? Well, basically, I don't believe Nintendo should be making mobile games. Now, as we've seen with Miitomo, mobile games that Nintendo makes directly just kind of disappear after a couple of days of people playing them, which is really unfortunate. And Pokémon GO, although it's successful right now, well, it might not be successful tomorrow. A lot of Nintendo's really good IPs, at least the ones that were released on their older video game systems, can keep existing year after year because they can keep reselling those assets on the virtual market and a whole bunch of other ways they want to sell it on new consoles with backwards capabilities and stuff like that. Because their old IPs don't rely upon online servers to stay up. There may come a point when Pokémon GO is so expensive to run that they just have to turn it off because they don't make enough money from it. Now, obviously right now, they're probably making a lot of money from it and they're not going to do that, but in the future, sure, it could just go away because not enough people are playing it, and that's a very real concern. Nintendo is a company that makes really good properties, things that have really good lifespans, and I don't think the mobile market is really where they want to be. But this whole situation has brought up something that I think we need to start addressing. As Nintendo fans, we need to start looking at this with a serious viewpoint. It's probably a good idea for Nintendo to start getting into third-party console development. I know, everyone's gonna freak out and be upset about that kind of opinion because we seem to say this every single year. But it's true. Nintendo needs to start making games on PC. Nintendo needs to start making games on the Xbox One. Nintendo needs to start making games on GASP. the PlayStation 4. Look, it's crazy, it's weird, and maybe it's not all that popular of an opinion, but if Nintendo were to start releasing really good games like a new Mario Galaxy or more Pikmin titles or anything like that on other platforms, they would be massively successful. As we've seen with the Wii U, Nintendo really has lost a little bit of the understanding of what people want in consoles, and maybe the NX is going to be different, and I really hope it is going to be different, because personally, I would love for nothing else than Nintendo to stay making their own video game systems and releasing their own games on those systems, making really good platforms that are just wonderfully Nintendo, and I hope it stays that way. But all the investors out there that saw all this money come in from Pokémon GO and disappear overnight, well, I think those investors are going to be really pissed off at Nintendo, because essentially, if whatever they release next, if it's the NX, a new mobile platform, whatever they do, if it isn't as successful as Pokémon GO, I think the investors are going to force Nintendo to change whether they like it or not.